Copyright and Computer Regulations, case number 12 for EDL 850. Section 1, background and facts. So we are in the St. Regis School. It's a rural school, roughly 25 miles from a large metropolitan area. Serves grades K through 8. Approximately 420 students attend the school, which means 2 teachers per grade level and 2 special education teachers as well. Outside of the funding from the state, they host 2 large fundraisers for the school and have a very active PTA. The school's annual budget provides basic material for teachers and a small amount allocated for new computer and hardware or software. Recently, the librarian retired and there were no applicants to fill the role. Upon receiving waivers from the state, Miss Lynn is currently filling this role, and she was a former teacher's aide. Most recently, the money that was raised was specifically allocated to outfit a lab of 20 computers for the school to use, and Miss Lynn manages a schedule for classes to have time in the lab. Most of them are using the lab as well. This money was raised over the course of 3 years. For high school students, I found curious that they're bused to a larger metropolitan area, so there is no actual high school in St. Regis. Who is involved? So I am Keith Sample, principal for 3 years. I'm from outside the community, and I've worked to gain support within the community. Miss Lynn, the main character here, she's a former teacher aide, hired to manage the computer labs on waivers from the state. She wants to help. She doesn't have a degree in library management, information systems, or a certification to be a library media specialist. There's Miss Brandon. She's new to St. Regis' 3rd grade team. She's from outside the community. She taught 3 years elsewhere. She is versed in copyright laws, and she's unaccepting of the copied materials. There's Mrs. Williams. She's a veteran 3rd grade teacher at St. Regis. She's happy to get some material. And there's Miss Evans. She's the PTA president. She helped make the copies and happy to see the school save money. So our current issues are Mrs. Lynn is the current computer lab teacher or library media specialist, made copies of a software program and distributed it to teachers in the building for use in their classrooms. One teacher refused the copies, Miss Brandon, and another one was delighted to get them. I, as the principal, have intervened in the distribution of the copies, in which Miss Lynn shared how she saved them school money, and the PTA president and herself made the copies for the teachers. She also doesn't think that it's a big issue because no one's going to care about little old St. Regis school. Miss Lynn has unknowingly broken copyright laws in her efforts to save the school money. Other concerns and considerations. Mrs. Brandon has concerns regarding the breaking of copyright laws. Mrs. Lynn is interested in saving money for the school. Mrs. Evans has the same frugal mindset to conserve resources. I, Mr. Sample, am interested in both aspects of this situation, so both saving money but also upholding copyright laws. Miss Lynn was considerate of the needs of teachers by gathering information around their technology needs. So she sent out a survey and gathered needs around their software and hardware needs and used that to get this software. Section 2, legal and ethical concerns. So legal and ethical issues. No specific individuals were harmed by the distribution of the material. However, the company creating the software might have lost out on potential profits made from the sale or renewal of licenses. The action of distributing software to others without regard for the licensing or agreement is prohibited based on the copyright laws in place. As it was offered to any who would have benefited from the software, there was no discrimination. So Mrs. Lynn didn't say like, only these teachers get it or only these teachers get it. She offered it to anybody who would benefit from the software. Mr. Sample, so my actions and culpability. So did Mr. Sample's actions or lack of actions interfere with the current and future success of his students and teachers? I did my due diligence to hire a competent individual and trusted them with a library media center and computer lab. The actions taken did not jeopardize the success of students or teachers. But I do think what will determine the impact of student and teacher well-being will be my response to the situation and how I support the individual and the school through this scenario. So in synopsis, in an effort to conserve money, share resources, and at the request of teachers, Mrs. Lynn created and distributed copies of computer software, which was purchased for the computer lab to other teachers in the building for use in their classroom. In doing so, she unknowingly infringed on the copyright protecting the software. So facts, gaps in knowledge, and impact. So who was involved and what do we know? So there's Keith Sample. I was charged with staff training and hiring. I'm concerned about the legal implications of breaking copyright infringement. There's Miss Lynn, the new library media specialist. She's aloof to the idea of being caught violating the law. Her thought is nobody's going to think of St. Regis and copyright infringement. And ultimately, she just wants to help. There's Mrs. Brandon. She's cautious to accept the new software, or to accept the software as a new teacher. She came from a larger district with strict policy on copyright laws. Mrs. Williams is a veteran third grade teacher at St. Regis. She's happy to get the material and use whatever she can. Mrs. Evans is the PTA president. She helped to make the copies, and she's happy to always see the school save money. I think the other group that is involved is the school board, so their lack of policy or priority of technology, a little bit of unknown there. What is left to know? I see multiple gaps in the information provided. So what is the makeup of the district? It appears St. Regis is part of a larger district feeding into a more metropolitan-based high school, so that makes me wonder what the demographics are, how many other schools there are, all of those sort of demographic type things that would make up this area as well. What is the acceptable use policy of the district? What is the licensing agreement purchased from the software company? So that could answer one huge question as far as what our agreement is with the company. How do students from St. Regis compare to the district? Like, what is their access to technology? Like, they say it's a rural community, but how many computers are there per household? What is their computer literacy like? Are they having programs? Do they have access to computers all the time? In high school, what is their expectations going to be as well? So what are their future interactions with students with technology? When they go to high school, is it one-to-one? So they're trying to fill that gap. And then what's the strategic plans of the district and technology goals? Impact. Overall, I do not see this situation having an overarching impact on the school or the district. I would want to ensure that the district is made aware of the situation to consult their policy and from a human resources standpoint and legal issues, but I don't see this having this great, huge impact on the district. The PTA should be notified as well since they worked to raise the money and allocated it for technology. Outside of the gaps already mentioned, I feel confident that I can move forward with a plan. Section 6 through 8, options, plans, and implementation. So there's many options. There are possible options, so ranging from like the least amount of action to the most amount of action. So nothing that is, so one option is always doing nothing. So I could just allow everybody to kind of work it out and we'll let the cards fall however they may and just sit back and watch it happen. I could just stop the further spread. So I could confiscate the copies, tell the parties to stop immediately and not to ever do it again, but not do anything else beyond that. No punishment or reprimanding or training or anything like that. I could stop the spread and train Mrs. Lynn. So putting a stop to any additional copies being distributed and then educate Mrs. Lynn on copyright laws. So, always just stepping up what I'm doing each time. So I could take back all the copies. So any copy that was illegally distributed, reclaim those, write up Miss Lynn for copyright infringement, and also train all the staff. Since this was all the staff wanting her to do this, then it would be a staff-wide training since it was at the behest of the staff for her to do. One thing I could do, I could fire Miss Lynn and take back all the copies as well. Or I think the most egregious thing I could do would be firing all the staff members who accepted the copies and reporting all to the authorities and the police. I mean, that's definitely an option. And then we kind of broke out some pros and cons. So you could see here, doing nothing, the pros, it's the least amount of effort. It does save money, students benefit, it maintains all of my relationships. But Miss Brandon is still uncomfortable, Miss Lynn doesn't learn anything, it could happen again. If I move over to just stopping the spread and training people, well, if I stop the act, that's a benefit. Students still benefit, it still saves money. Miss Lynn is trained, but it still allows the staff and community to work it out. Students benefit, and the school and staff are still at risk. The take back all the copies and write up Miss Lynn. Other staff members could be upset. That would be a con, but it does stop the act. The liability is reduced. Mrs. Brandon is a little bit more comfortable. Miss Lynn gets trained. It could create some trust in my ethics. PTA is angry. It could lessen the likelihood of teachers sharing with me, though, on the other side, too. If I fire Miss Lynn and then take back all the copies, it's definitely stopping the act. Liability is reduced. Miss Brandon is maybe a little bit more uncomfortable or comfortable, but all the other staff is upset, loss of access, so maybe the students lose a little bit of access to the program as they would have otherwise. PTA is angry, lessen the likelihood of teachers sharing, and I have to hire somebody new. If I fire everybody, just clean out the whole building, I definitely have a lot of people to hire. It will reduce the trust in me. The PTA could stop supporting the school, send messages to the staff of the severity, though, and Miss Braden is comfortable. I think in the end, none of those options are really the best, as there's so many gaps to be addressed and considered on the school and district level. I think first, we currently have to go with the assumption that the laws are being broken. So was there a law broken, I think, is the first question that we need to ask ourselves. So my plan moving forward would be as follows. So the first thing I would do is stop the distribution and get exact number of the additional copies made and distributed. So that way it gives me some sort of number. The next thing I would do, I would re-examine the licensing agreement with the company and district. So this would help me to learn a few things. From this, I can learn what the agreement is and how or if we even broke the contract. We might have purchased an unlimited amount of software, and maybe Miss Lynn had no idea how to get it out to other staff members. There could be all sorts of varying degrees of licensing that's purchased through a software provider. So we need to figure out what exactly ours entails. We could also examine the district policy on copyright infringement. This is an unknown. Examine the district policy on the adoption of technology. This is another unknown. But I think number 3 is I have to train all staff on copyright laws and technology usage. This is a must-do regardless of any outcome. I think if step 2 still implicates copyright infringement occurred, then I would follow some additional steps as well. So if we're found to be in violation, I think contacting the company to learn the cost of additional licenses required. So if we needed 5, 10 more licenses, how much does that cost? And then propose that the PTA use additional funds to cover the cost of the needed licenses. If this is not feasible, then remove the illegal copies from the computers in question, or find other ways to pay for them. If we're found not to be in violation, let's just say we look at our software agreement and it says, you know what, you guys had all the copies that you needed, so it doesn't really matter, you just didn't do it correctly. So I'd work with the companies to get the correct number of legitimate copies to the staff. I think other actions then to take regardless of either of these two outcomes. Definitely implementing procedures for the procurement of software. Create annual copyright law training for staff. Curate a list of approved software and how to access it and its purpose. Share with the community the curated list of softwares. And then create a focus group to establish technology education guidelines and outcomes for students at St. Regis. I think some possible outcomes in implementing this plan, the worst case scenario would be that the company requires us to remove all software from all computers, whether it's legally obtained or not. So we would be out the money and the software. Should this occur, I would still follow through with the steps and work to find a comparable software to pursue legitimately. Best case scenario is we have not violated any laws other than in the means of accessing the software. We work to remedy the situation by getting it installed legally. So we could get the licenses, we just have to do it the correct way versus the way that it was done. I think 2 neutral outcomes would entail being forced to buy additional licenses by requesting PTA funds, or remove the ones obtained illegally and we continue to use the software in the computer lab. In the event no additional funds are available to explore, other payment options could also be explored, or we could just remove the additional software. And there's my conclusion statements.